Let's bring in our own Major Garrett, our chief White House correspondent. Major spent 8 years at Fox News as a White House correspondent and is very familiar with the rise and ultimately the fall of Roger Ailes. Major, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, just 2 years as White House correspondent. I joined Fox as a general assignment reporter, then became a congressional correspondent, then became a White House correspondent. So in that little brief narrative, let me say one thing about Roger Ailes. I've said this before. It was true then, it's true now. I was the least Fox reporter at Fox during my 8 years, and yet Roger Ailes promoted me 3 times. He always allowed me to be the journalist I was coming in the door at Fox, exactly the same journalist I was when I left Fox after 8 successful years. He always treated me fairly and with professional respect and professional courtesy. I was not a part of Roger Ailes' inner circle by any stretch of the imagination at Fox. I was one reporter in the Washington bureau. He and I did not correspond or have a lot of phone conversations. So I only know how Roger treated me when I was a reporter at Fox. And as I said, it was with respect and deference to the way I handled my work day in and day out. And I extend my condolences to all those who know Roger, care about him, and are friends of Roger's, and to his family. His exit from Fox was scandalous and the product of a culture that he allowed and put in motion at Fox. That is the terrible way to end any career in professional life, whether you're in television or any other walk of life. But that doesn't take away from Roger his significant influence on American politics through Richard Nixon, George Herbert Walker Bush, and every succeeding Republican presidency since Fox News went on the air in the late 1990s, or his influence on the larger media structure that we now consider the norm in America. Roger Ailes took cable news and said, you know what? It's not 24 hours. News essentially ends at 8 o'clock at night on the East Coast. And he put in high-profile editorial personalities to redefine the primetime hours of a cable news network. That changed the dimension of both news as it was presented and editorial commentary as it was presented in the primetime on the cable news network bandwidth, if you will. That changed American life, and lots of people on the right are very thankful for Roger Ailes for doing that. There are many others who believe that set in motion a deepening of the partisan sensibilities brought to journalism, and that's something this country has not recovered from. All of that is part of Roger Ailes' legacy. Lots of other smarter people who know much more about the media environment than I do will have lots of time and lots of space to talk about that. I was an employee of Roger's for 8 years. We parted as professional colleagues and friends, and I mourn his loss on behalf of those who are close to him and those who care about him.
Yeah, I don't think you can overstate the influence of Fox News and therefore the influence of Roger Ailes. And I'm just looking at the Washington Post obituary. The very first line says that he mastered the art of selling political candidates like Hollywood celebrities. You listed off a few candidates that he really helped to make their way into the White House, particularly by using television and all the advantages that television can give a candidate who knows how to perform.
He understood the medium, and he understood its relationship to the political conversation in American life. And then he took that understanding and said, you know what, I'm going to create a cable network because I believe there is a vacuum, that the major American networks and CNN had created a vacuum, an open space for what he called at the time fair and balanced journalism. And as a reporter at Fox for 8 years, I lived and breathed and acted on that fair and balanced approach to news coverage. I covered 2 Democratic presidential campaigns for Fox because of my reputation as a journalist, and did very good and solid and oftentimes very tiring work for Fox covering Democratic presidential campaigns. I was on the road for almost 15 months from 2007 to 2008 covering what was then the most memorable presidential campaign of my journalistic career, the battle between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. It was certainly overtaken by the campaign of 2015, 2016. I don't think I need to tell viewers that. But in that respect, Roger Ailes did give reporters room to report and left them alone. And for that, I'm always appreciative.
Major, I'm fascinated by this quote that Roger Ailes gave to a biographer where he talked about his vision for America and what he hoped for America. He said that, according to the Washington Post, that he wished that America's best period was 1955, Midwest America. And for a lot of people, that may sound like a wonderful thing and a wonderful time, but it seems to be exclusionary to a lot of Americans. And I wonder how much because what people on the left will say is that those values permeated the Fox News channel, especially when it comes to its commentary anchors. And that was sort of the vision that they promoted through their broadcasts.
That is certainly one thing that Roger thought and that he attempted to bring to the daily story lineup of Fox. And again, those were all management decisions made in New York about the general approach that Fox News took to the American heartland. Lots of networks, though, in our country talk about American heartland and heartland stories. We do it at CBS all the time. We spend a good deal of our time thinking about things outside of the New York, Washington, Boston corridor and what America is thinking and how it's reacting. So that's not a new concept. What it was, though, was it was new in the sense that it was a constant or near constant part of the marketing of Fox News and its own definition within the cable space. And remember, what Roger Ailes saw was an opening, a vacuum in the cable news space. He knew he didn't have to get enormous ratings. He just had to get larger ratings than CNN at the time and then later MSNBC. And he assumed correctly, it was his hunch, and it was borne out by the market share that Fox News earned over time, that audience wanted to be served and served in a certain way. And did it at times speak to this nostalgia for a so-called lost America of the 1950s and early 60s? Absolutely. Did that sense of nostalgia in its own way course itself through this last presidential campaign? Did the president's slogan, "Make America Great Again," hearken back to that period of time and that sense of nostalgia? Absolutely. And Fox did play a complementary role in that entire psychology of a certain part of America. All of that is true. It doesn't mean it's a monolith, and it doesn't mean it's the only conversation in America. And as you said, Vlad, a lot of Americans who didn't feel that the 1950s version of America left much room for them are much more comfortable in the America we experience now, because it does make room for them by law and by inclination. That's a big change. At times, the approach of Roger Ailes at Fox was, if not resistant, somewhat skeptical of that. But now Roger Ailes is gone. Fox is going to move, I suppose, in a new direction, and our country and this conversation will continue to evolve.
And Major, real quickly before I let you go, when it comes to the legacy of Roger Ailes as a fixer for people in political office, for George H.W. Bush, for Richard Nixon, for Donald Trump, some would say. By an objective viewpoint, was he successful in rebranding some of these folks? I mean, he looked at what happened with Richard Nixon and Kennedy in 1968, and he said, look, this is how you're going to have to present yourself on television. He was very successful, some would say, with Lee Atwater when it came to the campaign of George H.W. Bush. But objectively, was it a success?
There are a lot of people who are much better positioned to answer that question than I am. I know Roger Ailes as an employee the 8 years I worked at Fox. I have certainly read some, but not nearly all, of the history of Roger Ailes' involvement in American politics. But it appears, just as you set that question up from an objective point of view, did Richard Nixon win in 68 and 72? Yes. Was Roger Ailes whispering in his ear? Yes. Did George H.W. Bush win in 1988? Yes. Was Roger Ailes whispering in his ear? Yes. Okay. By that standard, the answer would be obviously.
Major Garrett, our White House correspondent who spent 8 years as an employee at Fox News. Thank you so much for chatting with us, Major. We appreciate it.